Okay, so this is a video about introducing Ionic and Angular to you. Now this assumes that maybe you have some HTML knowledge, some maybe knowledge of certain frameworks, for example, Bootstrap. You have an understanding of jQuery and doing kind of within the browser coding, things like that. But I also had that, but it didn't really prepare me for how different and strange frameworks like Angular and Ionic are to somebody who's really kind of knows better the more traditional kind of forms of DOM manipulation in HTML and JavaScript jQuery. So what I'm attempting to do here is produce a series of videos just to kind of really help people orient themselves who've maybe never used these more kind of popular new frameworks such as Angular, React, Vue. These kind of frameworks require a way of thinking which is almost completely different to the way that you normally do, the way kind of traditionally one does HTML, JavaScript, etc. And I personally found it very complicated myself when I first got used to it, but after a while you get used to it. And so I'm just going to try to, if you like, go through some of the steps that you might need to do to become familiar with these kinds of environments. Now, you have to first of all install stuff to get it all to working, and the core thing that you have to install is Node.js. All of these frameworks, Angular, Ionic, etc., they all require Node.js. And also, if we're going to produce kind of mobile apps, you'll also probably need Cordova as well. Okay, and so these things can be all done by installing, first of all, this sort of overarching package Node.js, which is a sort of like almost like a JavaScript operating system. It's not quite an operating system, but it's, if you like, the foundation for all of the new frameworks, etc. And once you've installed it, you should type in, just to check that everything's okay, just type in node-v, and also it will help you because I'm producing this video in the 16th of December 2019. No doubt you may be watching this at a later date and things may have moved on from then, and so therefore you might find certain things in my videos which may not work for you exactly as they should. And so you can maybe find out the difference by just checking in the versions. So if I bring up a command prompt here, let me just get one and I'll bring it over here. So if you want to check, for example, let's clear up the existing stuff here. If you want to just check that Node has been installed properly, just type in node-v, and that should tell you what version of Node you're using. I'm using version 12.11.1. Once you've got that, they'll also just check that it has been installed properly, the paths are set up correctly, and then you can then start installing from within Node, Angular and Ionic. So let me just go now to the next slide. Now these are the commands that you'll need to install Angular and Ionic on a Windows PC. It's more or less the same on Mac. But if you've installed Node.js on a Mac, etc., or Linux, except that you may need to use the sudo command in advance instead of just typing in npm install /g, etc. You may need to use the sudo command. So I've already installed these things on my computer. There's the Angular CLI, okay, npm install -g. -g means globally, means such that it's not just in the folder that you're working on, but it's across your entire machine, such that you can then get all the functionality of Angular framework wherever you are on your computer. That's the meaning of -g. npm install -ionic, the same thing. And also, again, check your version. So with Angular, and the kind of the key word for all Angular-based commands are ng. So let's kind of look at that again. Hang on a second. So here we go then. So if I type in ng dash, this time it does dash version rather than -v. So there's dash version, and it tells me all of the basic things in the Angular CLI command line interface. They've got the various subparts of the thing, and those are my versions. So that just shows that Angular is installed properly. Let's kind of see if Ionic is installed okay. So if we just go to type in Ionic -v, Okay, ionic-v, and that'll tell me I've got that particular version of Ionic. Something you might wish to install right now, it's not absolutely essential because we're not actually going to be exporting apps right at this very beginning, but you may wish to do npm install -g ionic Cordova. Oh, I don't need the extra. Sorry. You can all them. Install them together. npm install -g ionic Cordova. That will install both Ionic and Cordova at the same time. Cordova is the tool which gives you a way of interacting with specific phone-based functionalities such as accelerometer, GPS, gyroscope, things like that. But also it has the functionality built in for packaging, generating the .apk files, for example, on Android, which you can then kind of like send up to the App Store to Google Play, as well as being able to produce the files necessary for iOS apps. And you can also do a check of your version once you've installed Cordova by doing Cordova-v. You could also, if you want to, just separately install Cordova, which would be npm install -g Cordova without Ionic. Let's just check what we've got there, Cordova-v. So if I type that one in again, hang on a minute, here we go. So Cordova/v, and that tells me it's version 9. Okay, so I've got, that's kind of like just checks that we've got everything ready and set up. Having got all that done, I'll just explain to you before kind of I go on to anything else, kind of the way I'm going to proceed. Now, Ionic up to version 4 was very tightly tied to Angular, so really you had to know Angular in order to really do anything with Ionic. But since then, given that the kind of popularity of other frameworks has increased, such as React, which is very much associated with Facebook, since Angular, by the way, is associated with Google, but since kind of popularity at the time of speaking is React has become extremely popular, you can choose to set up an Ionic app with a React framework rather than with Angular framework, and you can also choose a Vue framework rather than Angular framework. However, because I can't do kind of the same tutorial kind of 3 times every single time, so therefore I'm going to stick with Angular. But you can, no problem with you kind of looking up React and seeing if you might prefer to use React. Please have a look at that. Okay, so that's kind of like that's got us ready. And what I'm proposing to do now in the next tutorial is to try the simplest things possible, namely a very simple hello world, and then also a very simple 2 or 3 page app which has got different content on different pages. And I'm going to show you that just to kind of show you how different the whole kind of the way of thinking in Ionic and Angular is from in traditional HTML JavaScript development.